Welcome to Just Break Up, the podcast about love, heartbreak, and all the relationship advice you don't want to hear. My name is Sierra DeMulder.
And I'm Sam Blackwell, and today we're going to answer a letter from somebody who can't decide whether to just break up with her very social girlfriend. But before we begin, we just want to give you our Surgeon General's warning, which is that Sierra and I are not licensed mental health practitioners.
No, we are not professionals. We are not trained in any of this, so please take our advice as you see fit. We're only here to offer our humble musings to hopefully shed some understanding and maybe some laughs about the incredibly rewarding but mostly confusing experience that is love.
All right, let's get into today's letter. So today's letter is from All in My Head Girlfriend, whose pronouns are she, her, who's writing from the City That Never Sleeps, USA. Dear Sam and Sierra, I, 28, female, have been in a relationship with my girlfriend, 28, female, for 1.5 years. I'm writing because I have been thinking about breaking up with her on and off for the last year, and more acutely for the last 6 months, but I can't bring myself to do it. We met on a dating app and hit it off immediately. She is very funny and outgoing, and as somebody who is more introverted, I enjoyed our dates going out and exploring new parts of the city. She has really boosted my self-esteem in my appearance by constantly complimenting me, and has also made me feel comfortable being openly gay in public. The first flag for me was when a friend stayed with me a couple of months into the relationship and I was completely exhausted. The week before, I had been out every evening with either my partner or my friends, and I was a little bit overwhelmed by not having any time to myself. The friend staying with me suggested that I shouldn't be feeling so burnt out early in the relationship, and that I should try to set boundaries on my time. Unfortunately, I am a textbook people pleaser, and I have a hard time saying no to things that I know will disappoint loved ones. I ended up having a conversation with my girlfriend a couple of weeks later and told her that I needed a different schedule so I could have more time to relax, and she agreed to do this. However, whenever we spent a night apart, she would text me and tell me that she really missed me and that she wished I were there with her, and I would end up spending the night with her because, well, I liked spending time with her, and I wasn't really doing anything on my own, so we might as well be together. Fast forwarding a year to today, I said I wasn't ready to move in with her at the year mark. I told her it was too soon and we didn't need to rush it, but the real reason was that I was afraid that if we moved in together, I would have no space or time for myself and her personality would really eclipse mine. I've had 3 more serious conversations with her about needing time for myself, all of which ended with her promising to give me that space and time with mixed success. I told her that I feel guilty when she texts me telling me that she wishes I was there with her when we spend evenings apart. There has been some progress. Now, I usually can have 2 to 3 nights to myself a week without those text messages, but she will still call me for half an hour those nights and I will update her over text on what I'm doing. If I don't call her or text her, I feel guilty that I'm being a bad partner. For the last 4 months, she has asked and I have given her constant reassurance that I still love her and want to be in this relationship, which I think was caused by mentioning a breakup in our last serious conversation, which I've also walked back. Unfortunately, I no longer feel like I'm being honest with her about my feelings, and although I still like spending time with her, I occasionally feel resentful that I'm not in control of my schedule or my life, and then I feel guilty for making her stressed about where I'm at in the relationship. To repair the relationship, I think I would need to be honest about how I've been feeling, especially for the last 4 months, and about what I need from the relationship. I ultimately think that it would take a lot of therapy for us to be in a healthier relationship and improve our communication. If I were honest and brought this up, it would cause a lot of conflict because I think that she's happy with the way things are now. I had mentioned couples counseling at our last fight, which she didn't think we needed, and my personal therapist has advised against it because she thinks the relationship dynamics are abusive. As a result, I've thought a lot about breaking it off completely. I'm in the last month and a half of my 7-year PhD program, and I am really afraid of rocking the boat in my personal life because it might hurt my progress towards this long degree. However, I also know that if I delay further, we will start planning to move in together. I also am at a step for a big career change, and I need to decide whether to stay in my big PhD city or move back closer to family in the Midwest, which would also cause us to break up. I'm so anxious about the thought of breaking up and getting depressed as a result, but I'm also so nervous that I will continue to remain complacent and stay in this relationship with someone I can't be completely honest with. I have been feeling so stuck. Thank you so much for your advice.
All right, my darling. Thank you so much for writing and trusting us with this question. I can tell that you are feeling really flustered, frustrated, anxious at this crossroads in your relationships, and that you've been there for a while, but you're not really sure. You're feeling stuck because of your people-pleasing tendency, because of all the big life decisions that are, swirling around you at the same time that you're thinking about making a big life decision. And I'm also hearing in your letter a lot of back and forth about the discomfort that you're feeling in this relationship and the shame that you are feeling yourself about, your need for introversion and private time. It's not just that your partner is an extrovert. It's that you feel bad that you are not that, and that you need more. So there's a lot to unpack here, but I feel really excited to talk about this with you. And, to out the gate before we take a very quick break, I'm not sure if this relationship needs to end or not. We trust you to know. But we're going to talk about it like a little bit vaguely, but please know that we trust you to know that this relationship has met its expiration date or not. But we've got a lot to get into. But first, we're going to take a very quick break.
All right, everyone, welcome back. Yes, like Sierra said before the break, this is such a difficult place to be in with all of the changes that are going on in your life, and then sort of feeling like this relationship isn't working in the way that you would like to. And, we talk about this all the time on the podcast, but it's hard to break up with people. I think that sometimes we get
the hardest.
Absolutely. Like, it's hard to be broken up with. It's also hard to break up with people, right? Unless you're like
whoever thinks it's easy should write a book.
Right. Like, whoever's like, oh yeah, it's so easy to break up with people has like clearly never broken up with a person before, because like it hurts to disappoint people 100%, just like you say in your letter. And like I said, it sounds like you're getting a lot of clues from your own understanding of this relationship and also from your therapist that like this isn't the relationship for you. And, I think Sierra and I want to honor that you get to decide what you want to do in this situation.
Yeah.
And like,
we
if you're
only have
feeling
one
like,
piece of paper.
Absolutely. We've got literally like 400 words or something, right? So like, if you are feeling like this relationship isn't for you, then you need to do what you need to do to get out of it. And I think that you owe it to yourself and also to your girlfriend to do that in as expedient a way as possible, right? So I don't think you should wait until the end of your PhD dissertation. I think if you are not feeling this relationship, then you need to have a conversation with her and say, listen, our lifestyles are just too different. You are too extroverted and I need more time. I'm processing through my own stuff around people pleasing, and I'm just not in the space to be able to maintain this relationship. And it's just not working for me.
I've overextended myself.
Absolutely. I need to focus on these things. And unfortunately, that means that we can't be together. Right. And you can do that in a respectful way. You can't do that in a way that is not going to disappoint or hurt her. Right. Like that's impossible. That's not the goal here. But you can do it in a way that aligns with your integrity, with your understanding of yourself, with your love and respect for her, even though you can't be in a relationship with her. Right. And it's going to be hard. It's going to be disappointing. She's going to be hurt by it. And also, this big hurt is better than the tiny hurts that you're experiencing every day by still being in a relationship with somebody that you don't want to be in a relationship with. Right. So like, that's how we want to start, which is like you can and should break up with this person if you want to break up with them.
Yeah.
And we're going to also offer some
and there's
places
more.
where, yeah, absolutely. Right.
One of the foundational ideas in this letter is the idea that it is less painful and the kinder thing to swallow yourself and to swallow your needs instead of doing the big hurtful, quote, selfish thing that is to break up, right? But that's not true, right? It's less kind to be disingenuous in a relationship that you don't want to be in. And you're doing all these little paper cut hurts of like forgoing yourself, forgetting yourself, overstep your boundaries, or just being generally unhappy. And you're doing all those little things to avoid the big disappointment of breaking up with this person. However, Sam and I also see some patterns in here that we think they're going to be extremely important for you to explore either in this relationship if you choose to repair it, or in any relationship moving forward.
Yeah, I think one of the things that stood out to me in your letter was, this combination that you have of being an introvert who's also a people pleaser, and like, as also an introvert who is a people pleaser, which is like the worst combination, because I feel like if you got your energy from other people, it would be so much easier to please them, instead of having to be like, yes, what do you need? And then like, I need to retreat. Like that combination just like leads to all of these different like cycles of guilt and overextending that can be so hard to be in. And I also want to like name some things that I think are showing up in your relationship that I would need to be reminded of, or that I would need to take some closer looks at, because my initial response to what was happening would be to do what I think you're doing, which is like withdrawal and then feel guilty about the withdrawal that I'm doing. And so
right.
This idea that like you've had a bunch of serious conversations with her about the fact that you need alone time, right? You talk to her about how the fact that like when she texts you at night and says, I wish you were here, I miss you, you like give in and you go over there and then you overextend yourself, right? And she listened, right? She said, okay, cool. And now you have 2 or 3 nights where she doesn't text you. Like maybe she'll call and just say, hey, here's how my day went. Which again, if that's not something that works for you, that's something that you can talk about. But then you're also like still overwhelmed with this feeling of guilt about not being able to give her what she wants or what she needs. And I want to just like say to you that guilt that you're feeling isn't her responsibility to manage, right? She's doing things to help meet you where you have asked for more support, which is that she's not texting you every night and saying, please come over, right? She's giving you 2 or 3 days of low contact for you to focus on things that you want to do, whether that's hanging out with friends or working on your dissertation or, just spending alone time, which is also really valuable. And so I'm curious about what your own thoughts and feelings about this need for time by yourself are. What is the story you're telling yourself about who you are as a person, what it means about you and your ability to be in relationship because you need this time alone, right? Because I will tell you that what I was told by people when I was introverted is that I was being selfish, or that I wasn't being a good friend to people, or that I wasn't showing up for people when they needed it, or I was being like a stick in the mud. Right? Those were stories that like were told to me and that I internalized. And so when I would say like, actually, I need a couple days off and would like go do my own thing, then I would actually just feel guilty because I was internalizing all those stories about my need for rest, my need for time alone. And it actually took a lot of work, and still takes a lot of work. I'm still not very good at this. Let me tell you how guilty I feel when I don't respond to a text message. Is that like I needed to remind myself that my need for time alone isn't selfish. It's not a bad thing. I'm not hurting people by doing it. And actually, if I can value myself enough to support myself when I need that time, then I start to feel less guilty about things, right? I start to say like, oh, no, I'm not being selfish by asking for alone time. I'm just doing what I need. And so I don't need to feel guilty about what other people are thinking about me, because turns out oftentimes they're like, oh, you need alone time. Great. Go take your alone time. Right? Like that's fine. Yeah. I'll see you in a couple of days. So I would encourage you, either in this relationship or in future relationships, to do some thinking and processing through this idea that you have that you should somehow feel guilty for taking the time that you need, or that people who are trying to accommodate your understandable needs for alone time are somehow making you feel guilty or making you feel bad for those things.
Yeah. I as the anxiously attached host here, as the one who would eventually learn how to give you those 2 or 3 days apart, but who would want to text you and who would want to know how your day, like who would want to check in, right? And I'm not saying this is going to be every single partner moving forward, but I think I think like that sounded to me like maybe a healthy middle ground. You know, you get those 2 to 3 days apart and we check in once a day. Boom. Sounds good to me. Not justifying staying or leaving the relationship. We trust you. Sounds like the relationship is on its way out. That's fine with me. Just saying that sounded like effort put out on your girlfriend's part, as Sam said. But moving forward, using the same experience as an example, those I miss you text messages or, check-in phone calls are going to happen in relationships in this one and in the future. They just are, right? Unless you explicitly say, my boundary is do not contact me for these 2 to 3 days, right? Do not give me the fullest space. And yet, unless you are explicit in your boundaries and your desires, they're going to happen, right? I think they're kind of natural forms of communication right now, So is taking time off. So is saying, I need mental space. That's fine too, but you have to be explicit. But my point is, these things are going to happen in the future. These triggers that will make you feel ashamed of taking what you need to be healthy in a relationship are going to happen in the future. So how are you going to receive them without forgetting yourself, without forgoing your needs, right? Because I'm in the future, I want you to ask yourself, like, am I being burnt out because the relationship is unfulfilling, overstimulating, too needy? Or is the relationship being burnt out because I'm not taking care of my needs, right? Again, this is why I keep reinforcing, like, I trust you when you say this relationship needs to go. I'm not rooting for this relationship. I'm rooting for you in the future, in future partnerships, to be able to say, woo, I am feeling tapped out. Because you know what? Thinking about that friend example that you gave, you did a whole week of socializing with your friends and your partner, and then you had a friend come and stay for a week. That would socially exhaust me. And I am an introverted extrovert. You know what I mean? Like, I like being around people. That would tap me out. So then in the future, is it planning a break in between those two big activities? Is it saying to your partner, hey, my friend's coming into town next week. Can we get together this day? Because I want to have a couple days by myself before they get into town, right? It's about advocating for yourself. And like Sam says, erasing that shame that you feel when you need to take care of yourself, because this dynamic is going to come up again. And I don't mean that in like a haunting, you're doomed, like Scrooge sort of way, But until we learn that our needs are valuable and we start treating them as normal, healthy parts of relationships, until we learn that, we are going to constantly be laying an unhealthy foundation in any future relationship, because the dynamic will always be, if I get what I want, I'm being selfish. If I get what I'm doing, if I want, I'm being shameful. I need to be what I am not,
Absolutely. And I think also the reverse is true as well, which is that, like, oh, if I have overextended myself, I've betrayed myself in some way, and I need to like never do that again, right?
Yeah.
I think there are always going to be times in our lives when we overstep our own boundaries, when we commit to too much stuff, and we need to like realize, like, oh shit, I'm 3 weeks without more than a day off at a time, right? Like, I need to pause, right? And I think it's great if we are trying to preemptively keep that from happening, and to say, like, oh, I know this about myself. I definitely shouldn't schedule things in this way, right? And stop. And also, part of it is saying, like, this stuff is probably going to happen again. And so when it does, how do I not retreat from the world and say, oh my God, never do anything ever again, right? I've gone too far and I need to be doing something else. And instead say, oh man, this next 2.5 weeks is going to be a lot for me. So how am I going to intentionally plan for afterwards? Or are there things that are coming up that I have to say no to because I know that this 2 weeks is going to be really intense, right? Like, I think sometimes, again, like we get in this idea of like the way that we move through the world, that it aligns best with who we are as people is by having boundaries that are never broken. And if they are broken, then suddenly it has to stop, right? Like everything's done. And And that might work for some people, right? Like that might be the way that people operate in the world, and that's okay. I think for me, what I've had to learn is that I not only need strategies for me to help support and reinforce my boundaries, I also need strategies to say, okay, when I overstep them, what am I going to do to help support myself? And how am I not going to be like, oh God, I'm a terrible person for having done this to myself? Or, oh, I can never do anything like this again. And instead just be like, oh man, this has been a terrible couple of weeks given how much stuff I've had on my plate. What do I need to do? How do I need to recover? What do I need to remind myself of in order to be able to sort of build myself back up and recognize that like it's okay sometimes to overextend yourself. That doesn't mean you're betraying yourself. Beautiful. It just means that you're a person operating in a very busy world with lots of different social or work or whatever things that are demanding your time.
And I also want to just add one last thing. I'm not totally sure on this because it's not my wheelhouse, but I do sense a little bit of an avoidant attachment style in this letter. If you know anything about attachment theory, it'd be worth looking into. And it's not the stereotypical idea that a lot of us have around avoidant attachment styles. I'm not claiming that you're running away from love. I feel like the internet loves, and our podcast circa 2018 love to be like, oh my God, they're avoidant because they don't want you. you know? And that's not true. Now I grew to understand that avoidant attachments deeply want love, deeply want connection and want belonging. And that's why they forego their own needs and boundaries. That's why you're sitting at home alone with nothing to do on your day off. And you think, well, I guess I should go over to my girlfriend's because like I got nothing else to do. You make that decision to make, to be loved, to be valuable, to be in connection with other people, even though it goes against what your like soul is screaming for you to you for, and then the, part of the avoidant attachment manifestation is when you continually forgo your own boundaries, when you continually overstep them, then you feel tapped out, overstimulated, burnt out from a relationship because you've been constantly lying about what your needs are. So then you pull away, then you do the swing and you say, nope, I'm done, And I think that's manifesting here. Do I think your relationship needs to be saved or kept alive? No. Again, I trust you. Sounds like this relationship isn't the right one. But it's important to point out these patterns because I can see them so clearly manifesting in other connections down the line. Nothing's wrong with you. You're doing everything right. You're showing up exactly the way you need to show up. And we totally believe that these are things that not only manifest in so many of us, but that are great things to talk about in therapy, great things to exercise in future relationships. And hey, unrelated, but congrats on your 7-year fucking PhD marathon that you're doing. You're doing amazing. Awesome. And guess what? You're capable. You're capable of finishing that program while going through a very painful and necessary breakup. You're capable of disappointing people and standing strong in your own needs and desires. And you deserve that. It's okay to disappoint people. It's okay to break up with people. It's okay to say, I need time and space. I need you to give yourself that radical permission so you don't continue to overstep yourself in the future.
We love you very much, soon to be Dr. Girlfriend. And we hope that this helps.
We love you so much. Thank you so much for writing.
All right, everyone, it is Friday, and on Fridays, we set you up with a blind date. So this is when we try and send you home with something that we really enjoy. And this week, we want to send you home with...
It is a podcast season. I think I've actually talked about this podcast, I don't know, way back, maybe my second or third blind date. It's In the Dark, hosted by Madeline Barron. Right, they were... what's the right word? Consumed. They were taken on by the New Yorker. That's not the right word.
There's a word.
Yeah,
acquired.
Acquired by the New Yorker. And they just put out a third season. The first 2 seasons are some of my favorite podcast journalism ever. It falls under the true crime world, but it's really more like investigative journalism.
It's really criticism. Yeah, it's a lot of criticism
criticizes
of
systems.
Yeah, like police and prosecutors. Like that's what the first two seasons are.
I thought were phenomenal, and the third season is different and just as good. I'm not done with it yet, but it investigates the killings of 24 civilians in Haditha, Iraq during the Iraq War, and basically asks why no one was held accountable for these arguably war crimes. And so they're definitely they're into new territory, but I'm finding the same level of high quality, intriguing journalism. You know what I have noticed with a lot of podcasts, like once they get into their second and third seasons, especially if they're investigating something, they fucking draw it out so much. And I really don't think this show does it. I think it's excellently paced, excellently investigated, well produced. I've gone back and listened to the first two seasons again in years past, just because there's such high quality storytelling and actually truly very informative. Like you really learn so much as well. And there's a mystery that they're trying to solve, Anyway, I just love it. It's in the dark. Any of the three seasons I would wholeheartedly endorse. But right now I'm finishing the third season of In the Dark, brought to you by The New Yorker.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much for listening. If you would like more content from us, or if you would like access to our monthly office hours, you can support us on Patreon. If you support us on Patreon for as little as $5 a month, you'll get an additional bonus weekly episode, as well as access to those monthly office hours. That's patreon.com/justbreakuppod.
You can slide into our DMs, send us your favorite relationship memes, but most importantly, you can submit your questions about all matters of the heart at justbreakuppod.com, which is also where you can find our merchandise.
Please remember to like, follow, subscribe, give us a 5-star rating and review. This literally keeps our mics on and helps us reach more broken-hearted souls who need two random strangers giving them relationship advice.
Just Break Up is a production of Duvid Media, original music recording, producing all magical things by our good friend Spencer Worth Davis. Make sure to check out his podcast and his music. And remember, it's okay for you to give a little bit more than you're getting in any given moment in a relationship. But it's just as important to make sure that you are advocating for yourself, saying yes when you really mean it, and saying no when you really mean it too. We can all give and take. We can all bend towards our partner's desires, but there has to be a give too. There has to be some sort of self-nourishment happening, or else we'll get exhausted and overextend ourselves. And if all else fails,
just break up.